On behalf of Citizens for Self-Governance, an old friend of mine, Michael Farris, and a few others filed. Now, Michael, you've got it. First of all, Merry Christmas, brother. Welcome back to the show. How are you? And how are you? How's your family?
Everybody's doing great. It's good to see you, Steve. Thank you so much for your years of friendship.
You bet, man. Good to see you too. Can you finally settle this for me? Is it amicus or amicus? What is it? Finally settle it for me.
I hear it both ways. I say amicus. So since I'm the plumb bob wall that's conservative, it's amicus.
It's amicus, therefore, so say we all from this time forward. All right, so you and a few others from on behalf of Citizens for Self-Governance, you filed an amicus brief with this case before the Supreme Court last week. And this brief said what on behalf of which side?
Well, we were arguing on behalf of the state of Tennessee that their power, the power of the state to regulate medical procedures for the protection of the well-being of citizens should not be challenged by the Supreme Court or by the federal government and the various plaintiffs in the case. They should not prevail in that case, that the undisturbed power to protect people from harm, and that's what it is. This is harm to kids. And so we were arguing pretty traditionalist theories of federalism, of the power of the states to not be overridden by the federal government or by the federal courts under constitutional grounds that are just made up for the occasion.
I'm well aware of the fact that you are well aware of the spiritual elements at play here. And when I first got into this business, brother, I never thought I was going to use terms like demonic as part of my just daily analysis and routine. But here we are. And your job is to come up with a legal case, right? But
right.
When someone is arguing something that has this level of baseless evil to it, that there's no fundamental good here, right? This is even in many respects more baseless and evil than abortion. Because at least on that issue, they have some cover stories like, well, my someone got raped, or the kids get born into humans. Something that had a counter form of counterfeit empathy that if people aren't aware of the spiritual matters could fall prey to. Right? This is just straight up. You have to be just gone, like Romans 1 level, given over to sign up for this. There's no counter narrative at all. The counter narrative is, well, your kid is suicidal because they have gender dysphoria, and if you don't let us mutilate them more, they'll commit. So the options are suicide or suicide, Mike. That's their narrative. Their narrative is your kid might commit suicide or he might commit suicide. That's just nihilistic in terms of a basis. How do you come up and craft a legal argument and not just stand up and literally say, "Thus speaketh the Lord God of hosts"? All right. Y'all going to hell if you do this, right? At some point, the ordinance has got to get, the stone tablet's got to get thrown down, right? There's just, if you're arguing this, you're beyond caring about codicils and precedents, man.
Well, indeed. The argument about suicide was an attempt at empathy, just as you said. But the science doesn't back them. The science is pretty strongly clear that the people who go through these kinds of procedures are much more likely to harm themselves than people who are allowed to just grow out of it. I mean, kids do have problems. A lot of it is just induced by the schools and by society and by the media, telling people that this is the solution for your depression, this is the solution for your concerns, this is the solution for all manner of internal struggles. And it's not, of course, the solution. And in no other area of life would we tell them that you do this kind of thing. If a child's got anorexia, they see their body not correctly. They think that they're too fat, but in reality, they're too skinny. We try to help their mind adjust to reality. Mm-hmm. Here, we do the opposite. We say, no, we'll mutilate your body to correlate it to your troubled mind. And that's just not good. And so at some level, Steve, I guess it's a slightly different way of labeling it. But we do have to say, this is not right. There's no moral basis for it. It is wrong. It is intrinsically wrong. And the state has the power to ban that which is intrinsically wrong. It would probably not go well in court to call it demonic, but saying intrinsically wrong is pretty close.
When you see a Supreme Court justice, Mike, say into a live mic, drawing an equivalency between the risks of taking aspirin and giving our sons the same chemicals we give pedophiles to chemically castrate them in prison, your thoughts are what? Because that, as you know, absolutely happened.
Well, it tells us that people who have the wrong values have been allowed to get on the Supreme Court of the United States. And that's an ongoing, long-time problem, but it's discouraging. But the good news is, I don't think that there are 5 votes for that position. I think that there are, I feel good, absolutely no guarantee of, even after listening to the oral arguments, how it's going to come out. And I have been wrong a time or two after listening to oral arguments. Bostock being a principal example, I was there in the court listening to Bostock, and I was shocked at the outcome. I couldn't believe it. But I don't think I'm going to be shocked in this case. I feel good about our chances, and I think that Tennessee is going to prevail, and right's going to prevail in this particular case. So, that's encouraging.
And if it does, the precedent it sets says what moving forward from there?
That states, if they want to, can protect children. It doesn't put a mandate on states to do it. So states are free to be evil politically. And, I wish that there should be constitutional rules for the benefit of children that would mandate the protection of children in these circumstances. But at a minimum, we give the political branches the freedom to protect kids in the way they should be protected. And that's the best hope that we can expect right now, and I'll take it. I'll take that ground and protect as many kids as we can protect.
You're coming to my neck of the woods here, I think, later this week, actually, here in Iowa. Yeah, for why are you coming to Iowa here, other than it's just a great place to actually experience a white Christmas, unlike Virginia most of the time?
Well, I was thinking about going on a golf tour of Iowa in December, but I hear it might not be the best. I am coming to speak at a couple of local gatherings, mostly of the local Republican groups and conservative groups, to talk to them about the Convention of States, which I'm, as you know, the co-founder of the Convention of States project. And so I'm there to explain to them why, if we're really going to rein in the abuse of power by the federal government in the long haul, we need to have the values of the founders, and that is structural restraints that are enforced constitutionally are the only way to protect our freedom in the long haul. And that's what we're trying to do, to impose fiscal restraints, term limits, and other general limitations on the power of the federal government. 19 states have passed this, all conservative Republican states, and we're trying to get the conservative Republican state of Iowa to do the same thing.
With a lot of our partners here on the show, a lot of our messaging right now is, hey, it's great that we won this election, but do not get complacent, right? I mean, the forces that we are up against, they're not getting complacent at all. They're going to keep coming. So take advantage of these moments and these opportunities. I think there's a temptation to say, well, we won, so we don't really need something this drastic anymore. But I would actually go back to the conversation we just had with you, before you came on. I mean, the reason why somebody like a Trump has so many of these entrenched interests they're up against, right? I mean, it's the amount of money you'd have to raise in South Carolina to take out Lindsey Graham, with all the vested interest in the swamp that want to make sure there's as many Republicans like that. It's very difficult to do. 30 years, Mike, we've defeated 3 incumbent Republican senators in primaries who were elected by the people, and a lot more than 3 deserved to get primary out of office in the last 30 years, right? So, yes. I think this even applies to the Convention of States. As you watch the entrenched interests now that Trump is going to try to go up against, even letting RFK Jr. ask questions. All right. Even if RFK Jr. is wrong about everything, finds out he's wrong, just the asking of questions is such a threat to these interests that they're so entrenched. I think that this actually is making the argument for things like term limits that the Convention of States argues for.
Indeed. And, just the nature of the process. If we get to 35 states in the next couple of years, is, and let's say we have a convention and in 6 months we draft 3 or 4 great amendments. It's going to take another 5 or 6 years before they all get ratified. Mm-hmm. So there's no scenario where Donald Trump is still president when this is finishing up the process. There will be somebody else. And so we're about the long haul. This is a generational level project that will last for 2 or 3 good generations. It will have 100 years of effect at a minimum. And that's the kind of structural changes the founders expected. The reason Article 5 is written the way it is George Mason said, there's going to be some day this federal government abuses its authority. And when that happens, Washington, D.C. will never propose anything that limits its own power. So no constitutional amendments limiting federal power will ever come out of Washington, D.C. The states have to have the unilateral ability to propose and ratify amendments. 2/3 of the states propose, 3/4 of the states ratify. When that happens, we've got a national level consensus justifying a constitutional amendment to rein in federal abuse of power. And if people don't think there's a federal abuse of power, well, they're just wrong. And the vast majority of Americans agree with that. The vast majority think there's abuse of power and something should be done. Well, this is the something the founders gave us. And we're 19 states out of 34 there. Iowa needs to become the 20th.
What you're describing really is a scenario where election by election, our fundamental God-given rights are up for a vote. That's and you're old enough, and I'm almost old enough to remember when that was not the case, where elections were hard fought, but the margins of fundamental life that you lived differently in America likely came down to 2 or 3 economic policies that one side had compared to the other. Someone's fundamental free speech rights, for example, or whether their church was going to be open, or they could pray in public for a political position, was not something that just on a election by election basis, that level of existential, debate was not up for argumentation like it is right now. And so to me, I only see 2 options to fix that. Revival is so that we have we're a people of social compact and shared values again. Short of that, it's what you guys are offering. I don't know what the other options are to not have every election be existential and we're at each other's throats for the rest of our lives.
I think you're right on both counts. And of course, revival would have to be implemented. And the way that the revival might be implemented is through a convention of states. But nonetheless, those really are your options. Any other talk of, let's just go win a few more elections. Well, I've been reading newspapers every day since about 1957. Let me tell you, elections matter. Elections are important, but no election by itself is going to result in the kind of change, because those are only personnel changes and policy changes. Structural changes are what the founders put a lot of stake in for the preservation of freedom. And if you don't nail down power restrictions on the federal government, they will take our freedoms, because power is the opposite of freedom. We can't have absolute power. We can't have absolute freedom. That's anarchy. But the balance is way out of whack, and we've got to move it much further in the freedom direction than is our current lot. And the only way to do that is to restrict power. And the only way to do that is with constitutional amendments written correctly that restrict the federal government's power to do a lot of things that they're doing currently that they shouldn't be doing at all.
Folks, you want to learn more, you can go to conventionofstates.com, plural, conventionofstates.com. Again, head over to conventionofstates.com. And welcome to Iowa, Mike, and have a good time, brother. Good to see you again. And again, Merry Christmas to you, okay?
Thank you, Steve. Merry Christmas to you and your family.
All right, you bet. Thank you, sir. That's a good dude. That's done a lot of good for a long time.